Okay, a little reverse on this. We're going to have Bill Simmons with us for a good chunk as we recap game one. And let's face it, Miami fans, you were really fired up. You're up 23-10. Butler's 4 for 4. There was an amazing out of timeout where they ran Butler on a cut. I even thought LeBron lost Butler a couple times. Jay Crowder hits a three. Again, 23-10. And then it was a 45-point turnaround blowout win. I don't care what the final score was. This was ugly and total domination by the Lakers. First thoughts, go.
That Hero had that dumb turnover. And then all of a sudden it was like almost a tie. But, Dragic goes out of the game. It's 41-40. Lakers up by 1. Never to be seen again. And by the time we see him again, it's going to be next year because I think he really screwed up his foot. I'm really bummed out. I really believed in my Miami by, winning in 6 pick. And by the end of this game, I was like, oh, my God, like Dragic isn't coming back. Bam's probably not playing hurt. And this is going to be a quick series. It's a bummer.
Okay, I'm just going to point out, though, that I felt like once, Miami's rolling and they're hitting these corner threes, and I feel like the Lakers were a little lazy on a couple of things that they were doing. But then it was this wake up of, oh, wait, like what are they supposed to do with Anthony Davis? And Anthony Davis had 6 points in that second half of the first quarter. They end up closing up in the first. And I really felt like even though the score stayed closer for a little bit, because like the Dragic part, yes, it's important, but he can also have games where he kind of floats in out. I just felt like there was this moment where LA said, we can kind of do whatever we want with Davis here, and they're really not going to have an answer for it.
Well, they also were hitting threes at a ridiculous rate for them, like threes that you want them to take. You want Caldwell Pope to shoot threes. You want Rondo to shoot threes. They're just going in. So I was watching it even when they were up like 6-8, because I'd watched so much of this Miami team during the bubble. I'm like, as long as it's like in that 6 to 10 range, they're fine because they'll come in, they'll have their little runs. Robinson couldn't make anything. Hero couldn't make anything. Bam, who all playoffs was unbelievable, all of a sudden can't make his little 12-foot shot anymore. And then the game just got away from them. But I disagree with you on Dragic. I think him and Bam were the two most important guys for them in this series. I think you could even see in that first quarter when Dwight was out there, Miami was just torching him with Dragic. Like, cool, we're gonna switch you, and Howard's gonna guard Dragic. We're just gonna ruin you every time you do this. And I don't really feel like the Lakers have a matchup for him. Well, now we'll never know because I don't think he's coming back. But him and then Bam got those 2 quick touch fouls, which again, not called in the Boston series, but in this series, it's like boom, boom. Oh, you're out, 2 fouls. And, we've never seen him play with foul trouble. He's avoided that this whole playoffs. He got it in this series. That was when the series turned, those 2 things.
Okay, so you actually feel like this game in this series would have been even if those guys stayed in? Because I feel like right away, first 2 minutes into this, we're seeing the series completely different.
Yeah, I agree. Because I thought I liked how it was going for Miami. The Lakers were making a lot of threes. Davis was going to kill them. I knew that was going to happen. So did you. I'm fine with that. Can they make open threes? Miami was missing them, but they were getting good shots in the first half. And the game kind of slipped away from them. And, I don't know if they knew that Dragic was really hurt. Because that play that kept showing where he allegedly hurt his foot, he was in the game for a few more possessions after that. It was 34-30 when he allegedly got hurt. He didn't come out until 41-40. But they showed that one shot of him on the sideline. He was really upset. And on Twitter, who knows if it's true, they were saying it might be plantar fasciitis, something like that. But, I thought the totality of Miami's 8-9 man rotation was going to be the one thing that gave them a chance in this series. And if you start removing guys from that, they don't have a chance.
The other part of this for the Lakers, the 3-point shooting, I mean, they ended up at just 40%. They were on fire for a stretch there. I mean, there's certain plays.
They missed 13 in a row. Did you see that in the second half?
Yeah, I mean, they stopped playing. Anybody that like wakes up, and you could already started seeing it happen where it's like, well, they got Kendrick Nunn going a little bit. Like, I don't want to hear about Kendrick Nunn. I don't want to hear about any of that stuff. I don't want to hear about garbage minute times when you're down 30. I don't want to hear how they may have learned something about themselves at the end. The Lakers just stopped playing, which the Lakers do. They did it against Denver. They did it against Houston a bunch. Portland just wasn't even close enough to be overlooked, never mind respected. So when I guess I just see this differently because, then they started saying, well, they're not going to go small because we've seen some of those small lineups. There's no big. Well, yeah, right. They still tried it, but like what's not going small? Not having Iguodala guard Anthony Davis? Okay, well, that's out the window. They have no other big body besides Bam. And I don't know what the Bam injury is going to be. He's saying he was hurt last week. The report was that he doesn't want to take painkillers because he's afraid of needles. He actually initiated that contact on the shoulder injury there on the drive to Howard, which is the right thing to do. But it wasn't like it was something where, it wasn't. I think he even got the call on it too. But like, there's actually, sometimes you just have to see it, Bill, to see how real it is. And as much as we respect Bam and respect, versions of depth that we can get into Miami, because I know you actually were kind of calling him out a little bit, saying, where is all this depth? Because Nunn's a no-show. Olynyk, by the way, even in garbage time, looked lost. Like, he just looks like a different guy now who doesn't have any confidence. So maybe the depth isn't really there. But what they don't have, which almost anybody has, even the Celtics have, are a couple big bodies and like a Robert Williams and a Canner to just go, hey, can you guys combine? Give me 18 minutes and some fouls.
They have that guy. They have Myers Leonard. So, if you just want to throw Myers a big body out.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a huge Myers guy.
But it's not like they don't have the guy on the roster. I thought Olynyk looked pretty good for the first part of the garbage time he was out there. And so, look, the way it's supposed to do this in the Boston series, whatever they're doing in game one isn't what they're going to do the whole series. And I think they wanted to see some stuff. I don't know if they knew the small lineup was going to work, but I think they wanted to see it. I don't think you totally know with these things until it's out there. And they put Solomon Hill out there on Davis, and Butler was on Davis at one point. Crowder was on Davis a little bit. And it was almost like they were just experimenting. And then all of a sudden the Lakers were up like 14. It's like, your experiment's not working. This small lineup. So my guess is, as this series goes along, we're going to see more of Olynyk, and we're going to see even Myers Leonard. I think they're going to gravitate away from the small thing with Davis. By the way, he's killed that all year. And I certainly didn't think it was going to be a great option for Miami this series. I think they're going to ease into a bigger lineup.
And by the way, I have no problem with anybody experimenting with stuff. Certainly somebody as good as Spoelstra, who's probably as good as any other coach in the league. We've learned too many lessons where we've written players off who we think are terrible matchups. And then for some reason, whatever, like 12, 24-minute stretches, we've seen guys just have games where it looked like they were non-playable in game one that are playable in game two. But yeah, I'm not with you on the Myers Leonard part of it. And even though I'm with you that, there's certain things.
I don't like Myers Leonard. I'm just saying they have. Right. They have a large body who looks like a center that they could try. Like, he's their version of Robert Williams, basically.
All right, but who would you rather have, Robert Williams or Myers Leonard? Who would you rather have? I think even I would take Canner over Myers Leonard.
Robert Williams or Leonard. Listen, Robert Williams, for 3 straight playoff rounds, did not seem to understand that every shot outside the circle was worth 3 points. Never got the hang of that. Like, I'm going to go under the screen again. It's like, yeah, when you do that, that guy gets a wide open 3.
Yeah, Serge makes those.
I don't feel like Leonard. I don't think he's complete trash. Like, he was like a 6-5 last year in 18 minutes or something. He's not like a disaster. If they just need just any big body just to like bang against Davis for 3 minutes, like, he's not awful. He's semi-awful. He's not awful.
I think he's kind of the best part of his game. I thought was when he was younger and he could hit that outside jumper beyond the
great.
elbow.
You love his bench guy stuff, though.
No, that's my least favorite thing.
No, you love it. Deep down, you like it.
No. You know what I realize when I watch these things, and I don't think anybody's ever going to have to worry about me being on a team, but I'd be a bad bench guy. I'd be like, what? I gotta get up again and high five everybody at center court.
This was the rap against you in the celebrity basketball game. They felt like you weren't a good enough bench guy. Weren't supportive enough for Kevin Hart.
No, Kevin Hart's stuff to play with.
And Luke Wilson's brother. Was it Wilson brother, not Luke or Owen, like the third Wilson brother?
No, I did try to post up Usain Bolt, and I was like, man, this guy's really strong. He must work out. All right, we've already done way too much. I think we hit our allotment of Myers Leonard on this one.
No, but can I make one semi-prediction? I'm not writing off Olynyk in this series. I know you are, but I'm not. I think the Celtics matchup, Spoelstra just didn't want him.
Too many wings. Yeah.
Well, no, it was more than that. He was the only guy they could put out there that Brad was like, oh, cool, I can play Cantor. Because he could actually, try to torch Olynyk in the low post on one end, and then on the other end just kind of stand near the 3-point line. And I just think they didn't want them to play. They didn't want that Cantor Olynyk matchup. So he just pulled him from that series. He's a guy who's been successful in playoff games. Like, he was the key guy in Game 7, Wizards Celtics. What did he have, like 30 points that game? He's not a stiff.
No,
And
he's not a Steph.
He
He's
can
not a
create
Steph,
offense. There was a couple plays when he guarded LeBron today where it was like, it wasn't a disaster. Like he stayed in front of him.
What, when they were up 30?
Yeah.
These guys didn't care
I'm
anymore?
giving him credit for it.
Oh my
I'm giving him
God.
credit.
All right.
I mean, Kelly O.
This is 10 minutes of being too nice. You just like the Heat too much. You like the Heat, or you don't like the Lakers enough.
Today's it's trouble for them. If Dragic is out, I don't think they have a chance.
Yeah, but you got to stop saying Dragic. They don't have a chance if Dragic played, is my point. Like, I am looking at this. Right. I almost started going like, you know what? I'm feeling this Miami team a little bit. I'm feeling them. And then as I got closer and closer, I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Like, why would you pick Miami? Why are you going to do that? And then before it, I'm like, Lakers in 6. I feel confident because, look, LeBron didn't even have to go nuclear at all. I mean, he ends up an assist shy of a triple-double, and he had some amazing moments and flashes, but he didn't even have to go crazy. And I do think, even though sometimes the zone stuff is tough to figure out, like, are they in a zone? I mean, it's not that hard to figure out, but when you don't cut and you don't have any movement and then it's 5 out and you're like, are they in a zone or are they just staying manned up and matched up the whole time? But there was a time where LeBron came out for his rest and Vogel still took him out when they were down 13, I think. We were right around there, double figures, when they're like, all right, LeBron's normal rest to get him out of there. And Pope hit those 2 threes, and then there were some free throws, and then he got the free throws in the corner. I thought those shots were huge because you could see the Lakers' offense just kind of stop, like, hey, what are we doing? LeBron's not out here. Let's dissect this a little bit. And then Pope hits those 2 shots in the corner. So it may not have been a straight-up zone because there wasn't much action instead of swinging the ball around. But I guess, like, I just keep thinking, okay, what would the adjustments be? Yes, Dragic coming back and being healthy, fine. I think Bam before.
Can I slow you down
healthy,
on this?
Before
you're doing game one. You're doing game one overreaction. That wasn't the Miami team we watched in the bubble the first 3 rounds. Here's
you're doing game one underreaction.
No, but here's how I know, and I'm going to wave whatever this white thing is that plugs into my computer at you. Here's
it looks
how
like
I know.
A vape pen.
That was the first playoff game I've seen from them in 6 weeks where they weren't getting 50-50 balls. They weren't getting any of them. They weren't diving on the floor for loose balls. There was 2 different plays where the ball was right next to Butler, and every other round he was diving on that thing like it was a grenade. And this round he's kind of staring at it. They were sloppy. They never had sloppy turnovers like that, other than like a couple short stretches in the Boston series. The things with them where they always won 50-50 balls. They played their asses off and they didn't turn the ball over, and they did all of those things in that game. So can Miami play better than that? Fuck yeah. I'm not writing them off yet unless if Dragic is out, then you're relying on Kendrick Nunn, which I just think that's not the answer.
No, anybody that watched Nunn in the playoffs, and I mean, even in the limited minutes he got against Boston, you were like, oh, that's good. Like, get him out there. Did you hear the part when
I love Mike Breen? So I hesitate to criticize him in any way, shape, or form. But he was like raving about Kendrick Nunn's rookie season for like a solid minute, and at one point called it sensational. And he was like, "It's a sensational rookie year," and I'm like, what are you talking about? There was no point in the year when he was sensational. He was really solid for half the year, and then he tailed off like this. And they couldn't play him anymore by the playoffs.
He was pretty good, and I think the expectations were so low those first couple months. He's putting up those kinds of numbers, like 15 a game.
And then he
had
tailed
some
off.
Big moments. Yeah, he did tail off. I also think that it was a blowout, and he needed to fill, and Nunn was hitting all sorts of shots, and that's probably what he did. I think it was just announcer filling.
I have the most important question of this podcast for you. Kyle, mark this down. This is a guaranteed Ringer video.
Breakout.
Guaranteed. Break it out. I could see the headline. Russillo. How well does Anthony Davis have to play to actually win the finals MVP? Does he have to average 38 points a game? Give me the stat line where people would look at it and go, God, we can't not give it to him. He just averaged a 38 and 18 in the finals. We can't not give him the finals. What are the numbers versus LeBron's numbers? How big of a disparity before everyone throws their hands up and says, fuck it, we got to give it to him?
42, 24, 15, 3 blocks, and being the head of a peace treaty in the Middle East.
At one point, Jackson could feel LeBron's finals MVP slipping away. So he did this whole thing about how important LeBron's been for Davis. And he's like, LeBron James has made Anthony Davis a better player. And there's this pause. And Van Gundy goes, I don't think that's true. I think Davis's situation has changed. I think he's just as good as he was in New Orleans. And then there was just dead silence, which is, by the way, the correct answer. Anthony Davis is fucking awesome. It didn't make him better to play with LeBron James. It made him better that he's on an awesome team. And that made LeBron James better too. It's not, I don't feel like they're like bringing out these new things out of each other. They're both fucking awesome.
Yeah,
I hate that
I don't.
shit.
I
Just
don't.
stop with that.
No, look, if I don't know how much credit we're allowed to give out over our individual lives, but Mark Jackson ran out of credit in like '06. There's just no left. There's no credit left for him to give anybody. And it's just like this LeBron part of it. This is actually perfect. I don't know if symmetry is the right word, but where all the LeBron stands were holding like the front of a Game of Thrones battle during the last dance, where it's like, hey, folks, this is going to be the roughest time of your lives these next few weeks for this Jordan doc.
Right.
If LeBron, as I expect, pulls this off and continues to add to this resume where, a lot like politics, I don't know that there's anybody that changes their mind. Like, have you met anybody that was like, you know what, I was MJ, but man, LeBron won his 10th finals. I'm going with LeBron. Or the reverse. Like, I always thought it was LeBron, but after I watched The Last Dance, it's just no one ever is changing their mind. But the lead up to him, if he gets this ring and with another franchise and returning the Lakers to glory, it's going to be, it's not that he doesn't get enough credit. It's that it just turns people against what becomes an obsessive storyline.
He has been discussed, broken down, talked about, credited, discredited more than any player we've had in the history of the NBA, because there's more ways to do it now. We have the internet, we have all these different things. He has been discussed ad nauseum year after year after year since 2003, and started to make, go deep in the playoffs in 07, and was discussed year after year after year. I have to have had 30 columns in my archives talking about, where he was at whatever point of his career. I think he gets the proper credit. And by the way, he's been incredible in the bubble. If you were going to say bubble playoffs MVP, he's the winner. I just wonder with the finals, with what Davis looked like tonight. And the thing with Davis, because people are going to look at his numbers, the defense was unbelievable by him tonight. He was the kind of ground that he was covering, and I actually thought he kind of psyched the Heat out a little bit. Didn't you get that sense? He looked.
There's
like
a
he
play.
Was he looked like he was Bill Russell tonight.
There was a play that I wrote down, and I forget where it was in the game log here, but basically, Bam. Remember when Bam had that fake handoff cut to the basket from the free throw line, and he got Dwight with it?
Yeah.
Davis waited for it. Bam went for like the fake handoff and then to step towards it, and Anthony Davis already read it and was like, nope, I already know. I saw you do it before, and I don't know if it was other advanced scouting. He's like, I already saw you do it before. So Bam just stopped, turned around. He might have given it to Hero, and then Hero was like one-on-one. I forget. It was one of the white guys, and he one-on-one, and Davis was like, come on. And the guy went to throw like a floater against him, and he rejected it. And it was beautiful because he played the two-man action perfectly. He shut off the drive, a fake drive, didn't fall for it, and then made them reset and then blocked the shot. And that's what I kept getting back to. And you're right about the whole idea that now Davis is going to... No, it's just that more people are going to watch Davis and see how amazing he is. If you want to knock him like we can knock any one of these players, LeBron included, if you want to get real negative about it, you can do it with any of these guys. But the Davis part about not having the dog in him all the time, a lot of times it's because he's reading the double and making right basketball decisions because he's just that smart. But when you look at some of these numbers, Bill, like when they swept Portland, 35-14, 22-12 on like amazing shooting, 28-11, 47-10. That's 2 years ago. I mean, if you go through his game log, which again we've pointed out can be a little misleading at times, but these numbers are insane. Like he doesn't have some of these duds that other guys do. It's just that his teams always sucked. His teams weren't healthy, and now he's playing alongside maybe the best player in the world. And I don't think he's necessarily a different guy unless you could say that LeBron at least puts him in better positions than the motley crew of guards that he had to play with, at least when Holiday was healthy and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, he's been putting up these numbers consistently in the playoffs. It's just that now he's on the Lakers and they're not getting bounced in the first round.
Well, and he's part of the best two-man duo. I did this on my pod a couple weeks ago trying to figure out Shaq and Kobe is the last one that's been at this level. There's been some great ones over the years. And this one is historic for a bunch of reasons, most notably the whole 42 club thing I have, where both of those guys are 42 club guys, which just doesn't happen. It's happened only a couple times in the history of the league. And I think what's going to be memorable about them when we think back years from now, it'd be like, you'll think about this team, you'll think about those two guys. But you also think about series by series was a better matchup for one of the two guys. And that's when it gets really tough because, like, last round, it was the perfect LeBron matchup. And he just ate Denver up and he was incredible. Not that Davis was doing bad, but LeBron, especially in game 5, that was one of the best. By the end of that series, that was one of the best series I think I've seen him have. And this series feels like it's going to be the Davis series. And I think when you talk about this team, when you compare them against other great teams, if we decide this is a great team, let's say they sweep Miami, that will be, I think, the calling card. Series by series, one of those two guys could grab it. The 2001 Lakers were like that. Because, like, if you go back and you look at when they swept Sacramento and you go back and look at the game logs, it's crazy. Like, one game Kobe has 48. The next game Shaq has like 41 and 25. And it was just game to game. You didn't know what you were going to get. And this is, as Miami tries to claw back, you could be like, oh, we shut down Davis a little bit. And then LeBron scores like 12 straight, or LeBron has 15 assists. So they need the other guys in the Lakers to suck. And that didn't happen tonight. When Caldwell Pope is making threes, you're fucked. You need him to miss. You need Rondo to miss. You need Dwight to do dumb shit and get a flagrant. You need the other guys on that team to undermine them. You're not going to take out LeBron and Davis.
Now, Pope actually didn't shoot it great, but Danny Green, it always felt like, I just thought that first quarter run by Pope was super important.
It was.
And then Danny Green was hitting some threes. I mean, Rondo ended up 1 of 5 from 3, but I still can't believe he's taking shots.
He made the first one.
He made the first one. And it's funny because he even later on, he took a dribble step back 3. I don't think I've ever seen him do that. I was like, what the hell was that? It was like the Harden step back shuffle with Rondo. They killed him on the boards. They got more free throws, but that's also a product of being bigger and being bigger around the boards. Like, and Davis had some really, really intense moments there. The duo thing, I'm just trying to think of all the pushback that you would get if you were to say the last 20 years, Davis, LeBron, because I'm not telling you you're wrong. Wade, Shaq isn't enough because, first of all, that team wasn't that good despite winning a title. I would say over the last 20 years, it's there with Dallas is probably 2 of the worst teams to win a championship. I don't know if you have something else to add to that. I mean, how do you compare the Durant-Curry combo to Davis-LeBron?
So aesthetically, really great. They just didn't put up numbers consistently like those guys did. I think both of them, like Curry was like a 41 points, rebounds, assists. Durant was like a 39. I think the difference was the shooting efficiency was kind of historic with that combo. Remember, those two and Clay, they're making 10, 11 threes a game in the playoffs, and all of them were shooting like 40+%. And just game after game, they would make 50% of their shots and doing stuff like that. I think the difference, LeBron and Davis together, it's more of an old school 80s, 90s, one guy with the 27, 12, 9, and the other guy with like the 38, 18. It's more like in that Shaq Kobe kind of zone, It's what we saw right before the pandemic when we did that podcast, and both of us came to the realization the Lakers were going to win the title because they were big and they had this size thing and the ability to get to the free throw line. Remember, we talked all of this out, and then the pandemic happened, and by the time they started basketball again, I was like, yeah, they can't. I don't know why I went off it. I still don't know what happened. I guess Bradley was missing the bubble. Rondo was hurt initially.
Maybe they played like crap too when on the restart. I mean, they did. They were awful. They didn't make any shots. It looked bad. But I think the key thing was don't hold their flaws against them more than the flaws of these other teams. Because you could talk yourself in and out of all of the top teams. But yeah, at the end, before everything got shut down, I'll never forget that because that was when we were like, hey, LeBron's going to win the MVP because of the storyline and we thought he was going to
sneak back in.
Yeah. And then, once the restart probably cost him the MVP, the whole thing. I'm trying to think of other Peja and Dirk duo. Where's that? Top 5?
Peja, Dirk. Old Peja? No, I think when you're talking historic, like Bird and McHale, Pippen and Jordan, Curry, Durant,
Barkley,
Shaq,
Mahorn.
Kobe, Havlicek and Russell, but these two, you're talking about Davis, who I voted second for Defensive Player of the Year. I had Giannis first, I had Davis second. And when you watch him in a game like tonight, you would think he was the best, hands down, who's better than him. But then, both of them should have been first team All-NBA. And I think they were, actually. Wasn't Davis the center? Both of them made it, right?
Yeah. That's what they ended up doing. Right.
So that's something that doesn't happen very often. So yeah, I think this broke really nicely for the Lakers. If I could have picked which Miami Heat players would I want to eliminate from this series if I'm the Lakers, I would have picked Bam and Dragic. So from that end, now, do they win anyway? Yeah, they were 3-1 favorites. They were favored to win, but I think it helps that those were the two guys that got hurt.
Well, of course it helps. I just feel like you're downplaying this, and I know this is going to be shocking to listeners. It just feels a little like, oh, well, Dragic went down, whatever. And I just feel like I saw a game where as soon as the Lakers were like, hey, you know what? They're not going to have any answers for Davis. LeBron didn't even have to do a ton, but then you saw certain times, especially they started hunting out some of the Hero and Duncan Robinson switches. And Duncan Robinson just has these games, as great as he can be as a cutter and off the ball and something. And then there's other times you're like, oh, can't play him tonight. He gets in foul trouble early. People go to attack him. I mean, having Hero have peak and valley games is exactly what you'd expect from a 20-year-old. So I'm not going to freak out about that. But it's just a lot. It's a lot to ask Bam. And all that Bam stuff on those rolls to the hoop following some other action that the Celtics couldn't stop for a week. You know, you're just like, oh, you guys are going to let Bam roll and dunk like 4 possessions in a row. It's not even an option on this. And looking at some of the on the court, off the court stuff, you know, with the big group, because we've all been saying, like, when are the Lakers going to go small? When are they going to go small? Well, they didn't need to go small unless it was against Houston, even though we still felt like, hey, they're probably better with Anthony Davis at the 5. So whenever they had problems, we're like, oh, Anthony Davis 5, Anthony Davis at the 5. But if you looked at the on-court, off-court with the big groups, whether it was Dwight with LeBron and Davis or even JaVale with LeBron and Davis, JaVale's not even in the mix now, those numbers are massive. I mean, there's even a number that shows with Davis and LeBron and Markieff Morris, who I think is pretty much lost, but he shows up great in some of the on-court, off-court stuff in those groupings. And look, it has a lot more to do with those other guys, but they didn't play Dwight much. Dwight's passing was really good. That's a minor thing that's worth pointing out because it was actually surprisingly amazing at times. I was like, my God, he's like making quick decisions around the basket, but he only played 15 minutes tonight. So they didn't even need him as a big.
But Miami wants him to play though, because then they can get him in pick and rolls and try to beat him 25 feet from the basket. They can try to run with him. Denver had some success. And you could even see in that first quarter that was one of their game plans. Like, cool, you're playing Dwight. I just checked Twitter to see what the Dragic thing. People are saying he might be out for the whole series, and it's a plantar fasciitis thing. Like, it's starting to gain momentum. So by the time people hear this, it might be announced that, you know, it's probably looking like he's out. I don't know. I don't see them. I don't think they have any chance if he's out.
Do you think there's any chance that the East was even weaker than we thought? And
Very
in this
possible.
setting, right? Okay, go ahead.
No, you think about how much trouble Boston had with that zone, and LeBron picked it apart in 8 minutes. You know, LeBron's like, cool, you're playing this? All right. I'm gonna break it every time and then get wide open threes for people. You keep doing it, please.
I mean, there's just little things that happen too. Like Davis got doubled, and it was actually a good double, and he kicks it to Markieff, and he hits a 3 at the top of the key. And you're like, all right, well, that's the shot you want. You want him taking that shot. You doubled it perfectly. It didn't matter. I know Van Gundy pointed out some of the doubles that he didn't like they were doing, but they were doubling in isolation on LeBron and Anthony Davis, and they're both great passers. I mean, when there are plays where LeBron decides to go into the post and turns his shoulder to see if a double's coming, and then Anthony Davis runs around and catches it. Like, when LeBron is doubled in the post and he's kicking it out to Anthony Davis to make a 3, it's like, I fucking give up. Like, what are you supposed to do with that?
Yeah, when Davis is making 25-foot contested threes, it hits that unfair zone, as Zach Lowe always says. It's one of those unfair things. Like, no, you can't have that shot. Come on. That's not fair. Can we talk about Doc going to Philly?
I have one last question, though, on this game. Are you surprised the Miami Heat did not use the Heat culture more in game 1?
Well, I wonder, it makes me wonder about the Heat culture a little bit. Because Heat culture, I thought, you know, they interviewed Jimmy Butler before, and he's like, Heat culture is about never wanting to lose. I'm like, oh, cool, as opposed to the other cultures?
Yeah, what is the Sacramento Kings culture?
Do the Sacramento Kings
we
don't mind losing?
Yeah. Let's get a sweat.
Yeah. I will say this. This is my only positive thing about this maybe being a decent series. I really don't feel like that was the real Heat tonight. I watched them this whole bubble. They are way tougher than that, especially with the 50-50 balls. And when you watch them, the 50-50 balls, they usually get. And if they're not getting them, that's not the Heat team I watched for the first 3 rounds. So I don't know what happened. Maybe they're deer in the headlights. It's the finals. It's LeBron. You know, who knows? Duncan Robinson certainly looked nervous. He was off.
Yeah. I looked it up to see game 1 winners and see how it plays out. Yeah, I'm out. I'm sorry, I'm out. I see it.
That's
I see
fair.
it going in differently, and I see game one differently than you do. And
It's fair.
you know,
We've disagreed.
no, that's
I
fine.
might be optimistic just because I want a good finals.
You
You just
also
want
might
this
be
thing to be over.
Why? Why would you say that?
Well, then we could just move to football. Just start thinking about, the Lions making a run, NFC North.
Of all the things you could
The
have come up
Raiders.
with, I think you picked. If you had 32
Is Baker
teams,
Mayfield for real?
Right. Yeah, as he turned the corner.
Odell Beckham, what's going on with him?
Yeah,
We could just do 4 months of that. As
I
soon
love
as this
Odell.
finals is over.
You know why though? You know why I don't want it to be over anytime soon is because the original projection of the NBA. And look, we're done with game one. We got it. The original projection of Christmas Day, or maybe it's in January. I don't know if you're hearing what I'm hearing. I think it might be March.
How about this? They have no fucking idea. It's that much. It's the
That's
we
fine.
have no fucking idea.
Okay, but that's fine. But what I'm hearing,
no, it's Martin Luther King Day minimum.
Right. And the proposal essentially is as owners go, all right, what are we doing? How are we going to do this? It's like, so wait, if we rush back, we have no fans, but if we maybe wait 2 more months, we could have fans. So I just think it's important for us to point it out there with the people that we talk to that it's far more likely to be a later start because that gives them more of a window to actually get people back in there because they certainly don't want another season with no fans.
Look, there's a habit of when we do podcasts, we say something and then 3 days later it becomes like, oh, this. And we're like, yeah, we talked about that 3 days ago.
Like Disney.
Well, like me, Doc Rivers going to Philly. I talked about that on my podcast yesterday. It's if they agree to a deal, he's going to Philly. And that was done from the moment he got fired. But with this start of the season next year, they're not starting the season without fans. They want fans because guess what fans bring? Money. Guess what money brings?
And passion.
Them not losing money. Yeah. So they're going to try to figure out every possible scenario to start with fans. And worst case scenario, they'll do like some 18, 20 game bubble thing just for like a 20 game stretch, take a break, and then hope they have fans. But it's like so far away from being figured out. They know they're not getting a vaccine. Silver admitted that in the commissioner interview today. What they care about is this quick testing that they can do where you could basically, test the players every day. You can test fans coming into the game. Like if there's like a saliva test where instantly, you're clear, you let you in. They're looking at variables where it's like, it's done by seniority with season ticket holders, and somebody like my dad, he gets to go because has longevity, but nobody can be in the 2 seats next to him. Like that's all the shit they're talking about. They don't have any answers yet. I think it's minimum March.
Yeah, no, we're in agreement. And remember, as this lead up, we were trying to always figure everything out. Every time you talk to somebody, be like, "Hey, we don't know. But what I feel really comfortable in saying is that there's no way this thing's happening. Well, I shouldn't say no way because maybe something changes, but it feels more and more delayed than I think is at least out there publicly. Okay.
Well, it's too much. It's too much money, and there's a big difference between regular season money and playoff money. Because you look at a team like the Warriors, and it's like $5 million a home game basically for them, plus all the stuff they own around the arena and things like that, and the parking and everything. So they're looking at it just like every regular season game we don't have fans, I lose $5 million a game. How long can we stretch this out to maybe get to a world where there are fans? And at some point, they're going to have a come to Jesus moment where they just have to decide.
All right, you made a good point because by the time this comes out and trying to keep up with all the coaching stuff, which I think is kind of low-key ridiculous, like how much stuff has gone on in a very short amount of time. And I think it depends on who you're talking to because there's just so much stuff, but yet it's happening at the same time that we have the NBA Finals here. So I don't think it's necessarily getting all that attention. We know Doc gets fired from the Clippers. I know what I've read. I'll add to it what I've heard, and that it was a surprise to Doc. Doc didn't leave the bubble blowing the 3-1 lead thinking he was going to get fired. And I know it was reported that they kind of talked it out and then there's sort of a mutual understanding. I don't know that I buy that. I think at one point, Doc definitely thought he was going to be able to get the chance to come back. They're going to run it back with this group. It was only 1 year. Yes, it was disastrous end, but hey, chances are teams are usually stay the course and see if they can't figure it out the next year because it's still on paper a good team. But the part that I learned more about was that when they did get bounced by Denver, blowing that 3-1 lead, blowing all those double-digit leads, that Ballmer went crazy, okay? Ballmer, who is super passionate, and we know he is worth more than I think the next 7 ownership groups combined. He's worth $70 billion as of today, and the next 7 owners are worth like around that, depending on the paper on the day. And just because he's worth more doesn't mean he gets to be more rational. But I always remind people that owners are just like fans. They just have the checkbook. And Ballmer was great at his introductory press conference. He's like, look, I don't really know how this works. So guess what Ballmer does? He pays Doc a ton of money to be the coach and the GM. And then they take the GM stuff away from him. They bring in Lawrence Frank, who I like. I think is really good. He pulls off this great offseason last year. We get to that a little bit later. Maybe you disagree. He pays Frank a lot of money. There's a number 2 guy that makes a lot of money. I think the number 3 guy makes a lot of money. And when I started asking around about it, there's a lot of people in the league that are like, man, the Clippers, like Ballmer cut some checks for this group. So there does this group say, hey.
Plus assistant coaches.
Yeah.
They have like the most expensive assistant coaches too.
And Doc is known for that. I remember when the Celtics, like after a while, I would say there was times maybe they're frustrated with Doc and they're like, why are we paying 1,000 assistants all of this money? And we probably don't even have that great of a team. But, look, whatever. Ballmer says yes. He says yes to the trade for George and all the first round picks. He says yes because it gets him Kawhi. And they lose this series to Denver. And then he's thinking like, wait a minute, like we got Kawhi and George on 2+1s. So in a year from now, these guys could actually, in theory, leave. You sold me on all of this stuff. And that Ballmer actually, instead of settling down, where I heard at first, he was like ready to hit the restart button on all of it. And I don't even necessarily mean with the players, but he calmed down, but he didn't calm down enough to the idea where he could be talked back into keeping Doc for another year. And that's at least the pre wherever we're at right now. There's some other things I want to throw in. I just don't want to go too long, but I don't know how much you disagree with that, but that's basically what I'd heard in the last couple of days.
Yeah, the timing is the key sign with it, that it didn't happen within the 48 hours, 72 hours after, because that's usually what happens after a disappointing, a crushing playoff thing like that was so bitterly disappointing. And then you throw in 3 playoff series wins in 7 years for Doc. You would have thought, all right, it's time for him to go. Well, that didn't happen. And I heard all the same stuff you did that, initially it's like, we got to do this. They're talking him out of it. And, I think there was some real stuff that went on in that Denver series too. Jackie and I talked about a little bit where, they have one of the most expensive advanced metrics teams in the league, maybe even the number 1 most expensive. All of their stats in that series are the same stats that, that we're seeing from, if you look up Spectrum or the on-camera stuff, all that stuff, it's like when Harrell plays, it's a disaster. When Jermichael Green plays, it's a disaster. When Lou Williams plays, it's a disaster. And they're telling Doc this. And this was in the Ramona Shelburne, but both of us have heard it too. They're telling Doc, like, look, this isn't the series for Harrell. He can't play. Can't play him in this series. And Doc was doing the whole, look, he's my guy. If we're going to go down, we're going down with my guys. He's doing that whole thing. And the numbers, which we talked about on podcasts that we did during that series, are just begging you not to play these certain matchups. He just wouldn't do it. So if you're Ballmer, you're like, why am I paying all this money for coaches and then a front office? And the coaches don't listen to the front office. And then the front office told me to spend all of these picks and all of this capital to get these 2 guys, telling me that we're going to win the title if we get them. We're out in the second round. And on top of it, we don't even have him for 4 years. We have him for 2. What the fuck is going on? And he probably like flipped out.
Yeah, and there's another part that may not seem as significant, but I think a lot of fans can relate to it. And it has to do with Michael Porter Jr. Now, Michael Porter Jr. is not the reason why Doc Rivers isn't the Clippers coach anymore. But I think just like fans who, one of my least favorite ones is for years, the fan bases would be like, oh, we could have had Tony Parker. And I want to be like, right, because when Tony Parker was drafted, the 19-year-old little French kid, you were super mad that your team passed on him at the time. Like, you definitely didn't watch him, and then he turns into a Hall of Famer, and then you say after, like, I don't always think that that's fair. But if you look at the Clippers in the year they had Michael Porter Jr. in the draft, they take Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who turns out to be terrific, even if I had to maybe reassess what I thought of him during the playoffs in that Houston series, and then Jerome Robinson, which I'm telling you right now, I never understood that pick. They had 2 shots at it.
Made no sense.
And then Michael Porter Jr., of all people, is on the Nuggets getting buckets. We know he's not a perfect player here, but there's a chance he could be really, really good. And Ballmer's thinking, okay, so I'm paying all this money to all these different people, and we blow a 3-1 lead, and we blow it in a way where it's like we're blowing the leads in it. And yes, Kawhi stunk in Game 7, but I'm sorry, folks. I'm going to look at him differently than I look at Paul George, who continues to be atrocious in so many of these high-pressure moments. And then you're thinking, and what will happen with Michael Porter Jr. again? Like, what's going on? It's like, what happened? And I talked to somebody that said to me, because I was like I wanted to ask teams that didn't have a chance to draft Michael Porter Jr. because sometimes teams will say to you like, oh, well, it was this, this, and this because they're in the survival mode of spinning exactly what happened. I want to talk to teams that couldn't take him because of where they were in the draft or didn't have a pick. And it was like, you know what? One guy I talked to said, I've been doing this decades. Michael Porter Jr. had the worst medical we've ever reviewed. The worst medical ever. I checked with another team. They said red flag, red flag, red flag.
I heard that from the team too.
It was atrocious. And so the thing is Ballmer's probably wrong to be pissed at the front office if the Clippers medical people were saying Michael Porter Jr. is a do not draft. But if you're Ballmer and you've been writing these checks and now you feel like, I don't know if betrayal's not the right word, but you're emotional, you're mad, you're worth all this money, your team just pissed away this lead, you thought you had a chance for a championship, you didn't even make it to the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals, and oh, by the way, this 6'11" freak is hitting shot after shot and looks like he might be awesome, and I was told that we can't draft him. And then it's like, what? And it just turns into one of those things where it's almost like your own little pity party. Some of it justified, not justified. But when I was told that story, I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting. Because then you find, like, when you're mad, you start finding even more reasons to be mad to justify your anger.
Well, it's even worse than that. You mentioned how they had 2 picks. They were right in a row. They were also at a point. I thought they were taking them because, you know, you spend the 1 pick on the guy you know can help you right away, and then you kind of take the roll the dice pick, and it was the perfect range to roll the dice with them. I think Denver took them next, but they were at a point as a franchise, you know, it was pre-Kawhi, pre-Paul George. I think they traded Chris Paul at that point, and they were kind of in that no man's land. We're kind of frisky, we're kind of fun, but they really needed to take some swings, and it was, I thought, weird when they took Jerome Robinson at the time. They had
I couldn't believe it.
It was such a strange pick.
And it wasn't like, oh, you know what, the Jerome Robinson ceiling here. Like he was kind of if you want to, hey, he was a bigger guard and maybe you could have played both positions. Well, you just took that with Shea. You just took it.
But you had Lou Williams and you had Patrick Beverly. It's like, what do you need Jerome Robinson for? You know, I think they lucked out with the Zubats trade because the Lakers were just idiots with that. But for the most part, if you're looking at, all right, how do you assess the Ballmer front office post-Doc when they took the car keys from Doc? The Chris Paul trade was pretty good. I think that was a win for them. They got some picks. They got to rebuild. They sold on Blake at the absolute perfect time, even if it was completely cutthroat. And, you know, the Kawhi Paul George thing, when they did it, we both thought it was a great move.
I still think it's a great move, by the way. I'm not going to do any exercise where all of a sudden I think like, oh, you know what? You shouldn't have done that. And if those guys leave, but every single team given the same opportunity, hey, you're going to have to trade these picks, but you're going to get Kawhi and Paul George. Even if I don't like Paul George as much as other people do, you do it every single time.
With that said, neither of us liked it as much when we found out it was 2 years instead of 4. And that was a detail that came out a few days later. And I was really surprised because
I think you're scared of Kawhi, though. I think you're so scared of Kawhi that you do everything you can.
For the amount of stuff you give up, you have to get more than 2 years.
The players don't care.
I guess.
Look, you're right in theory, but the players don't care.
Get me 3 years at least.
Right. Okay, but if you're
3 and a walkout.
If you're the GM, Bill, and you're dealing with whoever you're dealing with Kawhi, and you're on the phone with Presti, and you're trying to make this simultaneous move here where you're adding these kinds of players, and now you're a completely different franchise, and everybody's excited about it, and it still seems like for all of their problems, I'm like, they still were up 3-1 on Denver. They still were up 3-1 on Denver. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, sometimes I think we'll look at college football coaches and be like, oh, man, this is a disaster. And you're like, yeah, he's 10-2. He's going to an awesome bowl game. Like, disaster is 5-7, folks. This was a disaster in the end, but I don't know. Would you have the guts as a GM to call, like, to stare down Kawhi and say, hey, this is not happening if you don't give me the 3rd year guarantee? Because I don't think most people would do it.
I wouldn't have done it if it was just for 2 years. I think it's too much.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's too much.
I think it's easy to say from the outside.
I said it when it happened. It really made me nervous.
No, I'm not saying like timeline. I'm saying to be the man in the seat that actually has to make that call. It's different than us talking about it.
Can't you at least make conditions with the OKC trade? Like, if he leaves after 2 years, our 2025 pick goes back to us, or I don't know, something. I thought it was really risky. But, you know, that's how desperate they were. They were so desperate. he was so afraid of losing LA to the Lakers, even though the Lakers own LA. And he was like, well, they have LeBron and Davis. I got to do something. Which one happened first, actually? Davis happened first, right? No, Davis happened after. But everybody thought they were getting Davis.
Well, the Davis thing went on for 6 months. I think. So,
but I think he just felt like he had this short window and they went all in. I don't know. Like if they beat Denver, would they have beaten the Clippers, beaten the Lakers? Probably not, considering all the stuff we're finding out about how dysfunctional their locker room was. But I think if you're going to criticize Doc for anything during the year, it was, the load management thing. It just didn't work. And I didn't say that at the time. And it's hindsight, it's 2020, all that stuff. But it never allowed that team to find a rhythm and to find any chemistry. And I understand why they did it, but now you look back at it and you go, it just didn't work. Because they never found that chemistry.
Yeah, because it was
they never had that 2-week run where it was like, oh, this is the Clippers.
Yeah, Davis happened 4 days before. The Davis trade happened 4 days. It was July 6th, and then Paul George was July 10th.
So I think that built into the pressure of it. There's no question.
Okay, I have two things that are quick, and then I want to get to the Doc and some of the coaching things here, and we'll finish up. But this I thought of on my own. But if you look at Kawhi and you go, okay, San Antonio, he doesn't have to be a leader because there's a million leaders there. He goes to Toronto, they win, which he deserves all the credit in the world for, but it was still Lowry's team. And then,
you have Lowry, you have Gasol, you have Ibaka, you have Nick Nurse, you have a lot of leadership on that team.
You get to the Clippers, basically Doc had to be the leader because Kawhi wasn't. And then, yes, if you're Paul George, you keep playing this bad in playoff games. I don't care if you're a max guy or not. I don't care what your skill set is, your self-appointed nickname, the most talented Jeff Green I've ever seen, which I don't think he uses. Those guys, like, I don't love the idea of, hey, we get a trade for chemistry, because then you end up usually losing the trade. And there's all these deals out there that could be a surprise to any of us. It feels a little quiet right now with some of the stuff, but we're always surprised.
They'll be happening
constantly. Yeah, there's this league offers us surprises all the time about what the transactions could be. But I would say, as far as like your 1 and 2, it's tough when you're asking them to be voices. And then like Beverly's the most vocal guy, and then he can't get right the entire playoffs because he's hurt. And I think even more of that fell on Doc, fair or unfair. That's where you expect Doc to kind of step up. And it just was impossible towards the end.
I wouldn't pay Montrezl Harrell 15, 16 million a year, especially when I don't know what's going on with the cap. Because I can't play him against the two teams I need to beat in the West. I can't play him against Denver, and I can't play him against the Lakers. So why am I paying him $50 million a year so I can beat, Sacramento in February? I just wouldn't pay him. I think they have to sign and trade him. The Beverly thing, he's hurt every year. There's always something wrong with him. He's never healthy. It's always this, it's that, it's something else. And, he is what he is. He's a poor man's Marcus Smart. So, Lou Williams, who's been on a million teams, who's one of the worst playoff players of all time. Honestly, if you look at alleged scorers who play 25 minutes or more in the playoffs, whatever, his stats are historically bad. He's completely falls apart every postseason. I don't know why you would think like that's somebody you want to build around again for this year. So I think they have tradable contracts. I think they have moves to make. Everybody is going to want, you can always trade for somebody's semi-mistake somewhere else. But, Lou Williams has value because he's like Jamal Crawford was the second half of Jamal Crawford's career, where people are like, Jamal, he's great. He's a huge playoff guy. Makes big shots. It's like, not really. What's the evidence of that in the playoffs? So I think they could clean house and build a team that makes a little more sense. And the keepers for me, Kawhi, Paul George, unless you could trade him for Bradley Beal, Zubats, Shamit. I think everybody else is available. I
would not pay. Look, I'm with you on Montrez. There's dark parts of him that I absolutely like. But when you start paying those kinds of guys north of 15, 16 million a year, you immediately regret the ink.
It's
You're
the Tristan
right.
Thompson 18 million a year thing. It's great when you have him for 8. But when it's 18, all of a sudden it's like, yikes.
Yeah, right. And it's like, hey, I hope you enjoy it, because nobody's going to want to touch this deal until it's like 2 years are expiring. Okay,
like Tice is like that too, right? Tice for $5 million, great. Tice for $60 million for 4 years, not great.
No. And I think you watch Tice all the time. You like Tice a lot, but he's not that kind of guy. All right.
Yeah.
So now this is the funniest part about the coaching thing. Like, just go through it in itself, because Ty Lue plays into a bunch of different factors. Doc certainly does as well. But Ty Lue, at one point, people thought around the league it was locked up. There's somebody even from Philly reporting Lue to the Sixers. And then Lue, I don't know if it was the D'Antoni leaving Houston thing that got in his way. That's part of it. Lue gets rid of Clutch. And then when we think maybe D'Antoni's getting the Sixers job.
I heard Lue, the dollar signs with Lue were pretty out of whack. I think he wanted to be paid like a coach who won a title. And, if you're looking at it, if I'm an owner, I'm like, well, you coached LeBron. LeBron's the second best player of all time. I don't know if you're worth like Greg Popovich money. So I think that was part of it with Lue.
I would say that's totally fair. Very accurate. Right.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to pay Doc like 8 or 9, I mean, do you have to pay Doc 10? He just made 11? I don't know. You also got to, every now and then it's not terrible to go, hey, who are we bidding against again? Like so many deals where you go, who exactly are we blocking from this transaction with this kind of money? Because what are we doing here? But Lue could go from thinking he had the Philly deal to maybe not getting the money he wanted. I still think he should have been in play New Orleans in some way, but if it were the price tag thing, maybe that's the case, because I wouldn't imagine New Orleans would want to start paying like $8 million a year for Ty Lue. And I don't know if that's true. You know what I mean? We're just throwing numbers around here. But then now Doc may block D'Antoni. And again, it's price. I actually, look, despite all the people beating up on Doc right now, I actually think it's probably exactly what like Simmons and Embiid would need, because if they can't figure out what those two guys, then I don't know if anybody can necessarily. I never thought D'Antoni was a fit with that roster unless they're going to change things around, which then circles back to Lue maybe in play for the Clippers because he's really close with Jerry West. But then there's always the element of all this Ballmer stuff we're saying, where Ballmer might just say, you know what, go get me Jeff Van Gundy. If Jeff Van Gundy really wants to coach again, then give me Jeff. He's a name. I have no problem paying Jeff Van Gundy this kind of money. He's got a better resume than Ty Lue. I know maybe people would debate, no, Lue's got the championship, all this different stuff. But all of this stuff has been really, really connected. So it feels like it changes all the time.
The weirdest thing about the Clippers situation to me is that they had no idea what they were going to do about their coach when they fired Doc. Because when they did it, I was like, oh, they're promoting Ty Lue, or, oh, they have, this other person coming. It was like when the Celtics let Doc, the Celtics extended Doc, and then a year later, Doc's like, I want to go. He knew he had a chance to get the Clippers job. And I called him out on this on TV, and everyone got mad at me, but he quit on the Celtics. He wanted to coach the Clippers. The Celtics didn't quit on him. They had just given him a huge contract. They ended up trading him. But the reason that they were okay with him leaving was because Danny was infatuated with Brad Stevens. And he's like, we can get rid of Doc and we get a pick for him, and I'll hire Brad Stevens. So they made the splash. The Clippers got rid of Doc.
By the way, the Celtics were pissed about it. Okay. So this isn't a secret.
They were really pissed about it.
They were really, they were like, they felt
betrayed. They're still pissed about it.
Right.
Yeah, they're still pissed about it. I think with the Clippers, to get rid of Doc, who makes so much money. I don't know what the buyout was, but the guy was the most expensive coach in the league, but not have a plan of who's going to replace him, I thought spoke to how impetuous the decision was by Ballmer. Not impetuous, but how passionate he was that I need a fresh start. I got to get rid of it. Somebody has to pay for what happened. And that's what whether that was a smart decision or not, we'll see. But if they got rid of Doc and replaced him with somebody who's not as good of a coach, that's not great.
Yeah. The way it played out, it just, I feel great about sharing that. I don't think Doc thought he was losing his job when he left Orlando.
Oh, you were 100% right on that. Right. This was not a mutual thing. No, it wasn't a mutual thing. It was Ballmer's like, it was your girlfriend in college calling and be like, hey, can you come over? I just want to talk for a second. Okay. Come over. It's like, yeah, this isn't working out. I want to see other people. What? That was Doc. Doc had no idea. I don't think. I think he probably knew Ballmer was pissed. I'm sure they had discussions that.
Yeah, 0% is probably low to put because, I'd heard, but however it played out and how it was reported, where it kind of felt like, hey, we're going to meet, we're going to talk again, I think Ballmer was just furious. And all you have to watch is the developers video and know this guy's a super passionate guy.
Watch him at a Clipper game. He's a maniac.
Right. Yeah. So if that guy's leaving Orlando going, we just blew a 3-1 lead and now I'm pissed and I'm paying all this money. Like, what are we doing here? I mean, as much as people hate the people that are in charge that make all the money, well, a lot of the reason you make all that money is because even if it's not your fault, you're the one that loses his job because of something else that happened. And maybe, look, some of this is on Doc. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm covering for Doc the entire time because I am not. I do like him as a coach.
He ran his course, 7 years.
That's
in
fine.
His time.
Yeah.
I have a question for you because I think we at least have to acknowledge it. Neither of us think they had another coach in their pocket when they got rid of Doc. Is it possible they did? Is there possible there's somebody that they're trying to get or that they think they can get and they're sending out the smoke signals of, yeah, we don't know who the next coach, who do you think we should get? And meanwhile, they have the guy. And if they do, who is it? Because the only guy I was thinking was Calipari. By the way, don't aggregate this. Don't put it in a blog.
Too late. That's going to be the title. Coach Cal of the Clippers?
Because Ballmer pays top dollar. Everyone knows. Everybody who has a good job with the Clippers is at the high end of whatever the salary is for that job. If anyone was going to look at Calipari and say, yo, what about $12 million a year? And if you're Calipari, is there college basketball this year? Are you even going to have a season? You just had the last one get canceled. Like, at some point, you're a competitive guy that wants to do stuff. Yeah, but who knows? Some college basketball. We think, maybe.
Okay, so let me answer the beginning of it first.
Is there another Calipari version? Like, is it just Calipari? Is there another coach that's
Mick
on that
Cronin.
level? Okay.
I'm kidding.
Mick Cronin.
I mean, he's an LA guy, so culturally he would fit in.
Easy move.
Yeah, super easy. Probably didn't even have to call anybody to help him move out.
Phil Jackson? No. Phil Jackson with like a cane? What is he, like 80 now?
The Phil Jackson stuff, nobody was doing that seriously. I think people were just saying like whatever. But at this point with Phil, like, and you had a great line. I remember I was in Alabama. I was at the Courtyard, and we got you on that Friday before like a Bama game. So this is a really long time ago when Phil was. What was it? Was it the Knicks job?
Yeah, I was like going to die on that hill that the Knicks thing was going to be a disaster. Because you said he was going to work hard. He didn't move to New York.
No,
he was doing it from Redondo Beach or wherever he lives.
No, the line that you had is you go, because we weren't that close, and it was like, hey, do you want to come on and talk about this Phil thing? And you're like, yeah, absolutely. You're like, where? I was like, I'm solo in Alabama. And you're like, all right, great. And you go, Russillo, do you even realize the major problem, like the first problem with this? And I go, I already knew I didn't know the answer. And I go, what? And you go, when they called him, he was asleep. That's a problem. And he's going to scout. He's going to run an organization.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, you were like, it wasn't even that late, and there were games on, and he was asleep.
It's true. He turned it in for the night at like 7:45. Yeah, there are so many red flags. He didn't want to move. He didn't want
the job. Like,
what
if I told you, hey, I don't want to work there, man. I don't want to work at the Ringer. And then you guys just made me offers for 10 days in a row. And then I was like, all right, fine. Would you feel good about it?
Stay where you are. You were like, because Phil Jackson, he told them, like, I'm not going to be one of those guys who's scouting college players. I'm not going to be on the road that going to different games.
Yeah.
And they're like, cool, sounds great. What was the job? I still don't know why they gave it to him. That was just really strange. But hey, good for him. He cashed in one last time. Guy had a great career.
I don't think the I don't think the Clippers know. I know what you're asking. So I don't know. Like my easiest answer is I don't know. Maybe, but my guess is that when they did the Doc thing, they didn't already know who they were going to hire. My question is, kind of
who are the biggest names available that we're not thinking of other than Calipari? Like Popovich? He's under contract with the Spurs. Carlisle? I don't know. I'm just trying to think of like iconic coaches, either pro or college.
Alvin Gentry, get him a 6th job.
Well, he already coached the Clippers. He can't hire somebody he already had.
But if Gentry got a 6th shot at being a head coach, then maybe
Gentry, Western Conference Finals, Game 6, 2010. It's better than a lot of these people.
I'm just, When I looked up Gentry the other day, he was, I think, an intern once and straight up hired 4 times. I was like, yeah, I don't think he's going to get that 6th job.
You know, the track record of the 4th job is not great, much less the 5th job.
That's a column right there. You may get back behind the old keyboard.
Well, I was
the
thinking
4th
like with
time track record.
I was thinking like with D'Antoni, you know, it'd be his 4th. What? How many teams is he's 5 teams?
Phoenix,
15.
Knicks,
yeah,
Rockets,
Lakers.
Lakers. That's right.
So
Byron
that
Scott
turned out well. That turned out well 4 times for him. I guess maybe the 5th time is the funny one then. The 5th time is not the charm.
Byron Scott's got Lakers, Nets, Pelicans, but they might have been the Hornets.
Byron Scott was bad. Nice guy by all accounts. Not a great coach.
Yeah. All right. New Orleans, the Nets. I'm trying to think. Oh, wait. Cleveland. He was the head coach of Cleveland. Byron Scott's had 4 jobs. I remember when he got the Lakers job and Magic Johnson tweeted out, "Happy days are here again." And they went 21-61 and then 17-65. They were not happy days indeed.
How do you think they're keeping Magic out of this whole Lakers finals, this whole thing when he's, you know, Pelinka wants no part of him. I don't think him and LeBron are like airtight. Who knows what's going on with him and Jeannie, but he hasn't inserted himself in the proceedings, which is a Magic, especially. Let's be honest. We love Magic, but he's not a sit on the sidelines, not be heard from guy. Like, do you think, does he pop on First Take in the next 5 days?
Oh,
is Matt, I give you over under Wednesday. Is he on First Take over under Wednesday before, would you go under or over?
Under.
Yeah, Monday
this
or
pod
Tuesday
alone,
he'll be on First Take. Yeah,
this pod alone, somebody's going to reach out after the fact. Be like, we need Magic on right now. If they're up 3-0 in the series.
He's got to come in. He's got to come in with one of his over-the-top Laker takes. Like, Anthony Davis is the best Laker ever. Like, just some crazy, there's no way to prove it. And it will get headlines. And then he'll do like 2 other things that will make news. And he'll claim that him and Pelinka are great now.
The Lakers got to 4 wins before the Heat. Congrats to the Lakers. That'd be a good one. Trying to guess the Magic tree. He might just be locked into baseball right now.
Maybe. Remember though, he did the whole, when he left and he's like, I'm not gonna undermine what we had. He did that crazy 1-hour press conference and it just kept going. And reporters were like, okay, cool. Thanks, Magic. And he was like, and then he's like, look, I'm not going to undermine this, but whatever. I have too much respect. And then like a week later, he was on First Take, trashing Pelinka. It's calling him like a double agent or whatever. All that crazy shit he said. Like we will definitely hear from Magic over the next week. It's happening.
That's the best info in the entire podcast right there. Because I hadn't even thought about it. And I already can see him up there. And it will be, hey, look, if it wasn't for me, LeBron doesn't come there.
He's trying to find out if he can do the Bristol car wash. They're like, Bristol's closed. It's a pandemic. Well, he's like, what about a Hudson Park? Where do they film First Take? Hudson Yards? How about a Hudson Yards car wash?
It's the Seaport, isn't it? Seaport
what if I was wearing a hazmat suit? Could I come on First Take then? Can I do First Take and Jalen and Jacoby in a hazmat suit?
Dustin Johnson could be running the Lakers and LeBron was going to go there. So.
Yeah. Once LeBron bought the second house in Brentwood that was next to the first house, and both of them were like $40 million combined, he was going to the Lakers.
All right. Your next podcast is when?
Tomorrow night.
All right.
I'm trying to time it for, I want to react to Colts Jets.
Smart.
So see how that plays out and, try to come up with a great angle, hit that and some other things. Looking forward to it.
All right. Sounds good, man. Thank you.
I'll see you on mine next week.